Hello, and welcome to the Seven Figure Life Fulfillment Podcast, where we share strategies to help consultants and coaches build life affirming seven figure businesses filled with passion and purpose. I'm your host, Ken Stephen, and my guest today is Tom Polland, and he's about to share with us how he built his seven figure business in alignment with his values. Tom is a lifelong marketing professional. He's authored several best-selling books about marketing. He works with professionals to embed his proprietary, can't say that word this late in the day, proprietary lead generation system called Leadsology into their businesses so they can enjoy a weekly flow of new client inquiries. And so far, he's generated more than 2,000 clients in 151 cities around the world. And here's the best part. He does it working just 3 days a week from a place he calls paradise. Tom, welcome to the show.
G'day, Ken. Thanks for having me. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm just delighted that you're my guest today. And before we do anything else, I really just have to know. Tell us more about this place you call paradise.
Well, it's think of it as a small spa resort. It's next to a lake. We have duck ponds and kangaroos and koala. I'm here in Australia. Tennis court, guest house, gazebos, swimming pool. It's our dream to live in a place like this. And Um, having built a modestly successful business, it facilitates us to be able to live here. You mentioned I work 3 days a week. It's probably an exaggeration, but I work for reasons of fulfillment and mental stimulation and trying to make the world a slightly better place. So, but it's been a struggle, I have to say. It hasn't been like that from the get-go. It took a long time to get here, um, but from a reasonably early age. I can remember back to when I was 16 years of old thinking about this before I even started any business, before I graduated. I wanted to, for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm not Mother Teresa, but I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to live a life which I could sit on the rocking chair, age 95, look back on and go, first of all, I had one shot at this life and I played full out. That was important. Secondly, to do it in such a way that left my part of the world a slightly better place than when I found it. So it's like I've arrived, but it's been a struggle. But I think for the most part, I've been true to those original values and principles.
Well, you and I are very much aligned on that and wanting to make a difference. And that's why I'm delighted to have you as a guest today. And I have 10 questions for you. Um, so are you ready to dive in?
Bring them on.
All right, question number one. Who is your ideal client and what transformation do you help them with?
Right. Well, the ideal client is a coach, a consultant, a trainer, someone who's marketing the invisible. So they have some form of intellectual property. It's not a physical product normally, although there are rare exceptions to that. And the transformation is that they want to have predictability and scalability about their lead generation. So their lead generation is typically consists of random acts of marketing, and they've tried a bunch of stuff and nothing seems to work particularly well, predictably at least. So we help them with that transformation, and the ripple effect from having consistency and predictability and scalability with lead generation is very significant. And by that I mean obviously the big impact is you get more clients coming in. But the ripple effect, what I mean by that is that people feel that they're mentally and emotionally feeling a lot better. There's a ripple effect in terms of being able to fund children's or grandchildren's education. There's a ripple effect on healthcare and holidays and lifestyle and where you live and so on. So it's a very impactful thing. And one of the things I love about lead generation is the sharpest end of a business. There's a lot of other things that are logistical that you can manage, but lead generation requires some degree of science and some degree of creativity, but it's also very honest. There's no hiding. Did you get a lead in? It's very measurable. So there's a whole package of reasons why I like it.
So Tom, how does that business that you've set up, how does that align with your values?
Well, it's more the modus operandi. I mean, the values of terms of making the world a better place and feeling fulfillment and etc. That's the way it lines up in that ripple effect. So it's a very commercial value proposition, clearly. We do work with people who do personal development and tuition coaches, as well as people who are offering very high-end consulting services. But it's about making the world a better place. And we live in a world which is one of the values is money. I'm not saying the love of money is a value that's be admired, but money itself is people tend to think of values as love, honesty, truth, and they are. But a kitchen table can be a value. Someone can value that. So money is one of the values, and how we behave to get money and how we behave in terms of spending money or giving money away, that's a matter of alignment. So the subject matter itself is not necessarily a reflection of my values, but the way I operate the business, I hope is.
Oh, it's really interesting, because I think I really resonate with that concept of building a business around your values in alignment with your values. Because I know from working in the corporate world before I became a solopreneur, um, often days I would feel stress and anxiety because I would be doing things in conflict with my values just to get
Mhm.
along and not make waves and just to fit into the corporate culture or whatever it is. And so it's refreshing to hear you say the importance of doing work that is in alignment with your values, especially if you're going to be a solopreneur, because you have to motivate yourself to get up in the morning and you want to feel good about the kind of work you're doing, and as you say, you want to be able to make a difference with the work that you do, right? So I really resonate
Yeah,
with that whole value thing, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you as a guest today. The other thing that that I'm really big about is making sure that you do work that fuels your passion and inspires your purpose. And I was wondering if when you set up your business, whether you had passions and purpose in mind.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, similar story to you. I got out of, so I had businesses from a very early age. I then got lured into a corporate management opportunity, which I very much enjoyed. And so I was working in a corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak, for 15 years or so. Um, but I got out because I felt there was a lack of alignment between what was important to me. We call those values. What was important to me, such as family time. I had a young family at that point, and I had 5 leave applications declined in 1 year because I was strategically important to the organization. They couldn't afford for me to go away with my family for a week. So that changed the direction of my life because I was listening as you did back in the day, to an audio cassette in the car as I was driving. And I don't remember who the speaker was, but he quoted, I think it was Benjamin Franklin or Mark Twain, but the quote was, "Time is the stuff of which life is made." And I literally, it hit me so hard. It was one of those light bulb moments that I was driving in the country from one city to another on business, and I pulled the car over to the side of the road. And I sat and I thought, my God, I don't have control of my own life. I've had 5 leave applications declined. I've got young kids at home. I need to spend. So that was the moment. That was the catalyst moment that led me to get out of the corporate life. Which Anna said, no problem. People being in a corporate life. It was a wonderful thing for me for many years. It just got to the point where I couldn't align the behavior that was required of me in the corporate world with my personal values. So that was a catalyst. And then when I thought about and discussed with my wife, well, what am I going to do? I started a program called the Entrepreneur Success Program, and I made a strategic decision that the program would address personal needs as much as professional needs. So, in addition to teaching business models, business strategy, marketing, hiring, performance appraisals, and so on, we also taught things like health and well-being, like emotional well-being. We taught meditation. We brought, nutritional information, etc. So it was a 3-year program that was completely transformational because people would walk out of that with a better business, but also better relationships, a greater capacity for love, more happiness, more fulfillment. So it was very much built on a reflection of the values that was important to me. And I'm not wishing to sound like Mother Teresa because I made a lot of money out of that business. It was my first 7-figure business. So for me, it was about having the best of both worlds, to not compromise the quality of lifestyle in order to honor my values, but rather to achieve the quality of lifestyle through the living of those values.
That's amazing. That's thanks for sharing that. That is amazing. Um, what were some of the challenges that you had to face early on, and how'd you overcome them?
Early on, well, the big one is always money, of course. If you start a new business and it grows fast, you're going to run out of money. And if you start a new business and it doesn't grow fast, you're going to run out of money. So, so from a purely commercial point of view, you've got to manage your money very carefully, and initially at least you can't afford to take too many risks. I had a conversation with the bank manager when I left the corporate cage. We put all our savings into an account. And I still remember him saying to me, "What are we going to call the account?" This is back in the day when you went actually to see a bank manager and you shook hands with someone. And I said, "Can you make the name of the account all the ways I can do this wrong?" He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I'm starting a new business, and my objective is to figure out one thing that works before that money runs out. So call the account all the ways I can do it wrong. And we'll just watch that balance go down while I make mistakes." Unfortunately, he wouldn't let me call it that, unfortunately. But so so I think from a very early time, management of money was critically important because that once it runs out, unless you found a marketing system and a value delivery system that people respond to, then you're in trouble, obviously. And we know that most small businesses start and shut down within 5 years. So I didn't want that to happen. And that was a challenge because I wasn't good at managing money. Um, but if I can pass on like a top tip to people, is that it's easy to look at successful people people you think are successful and to think they must be really smart. And my top tip is that you don't have to be smart to get to a seven-figure business. You in fact you only have to be smart enough to know how dumb you are.
Hmm.
If you can just recognize that you don't know it all, and you get top advisors in, um, even if it's a small amount of money, pay them something. Don't take on a free mentor. Those relationships very rarely work. Put some skin in the game and have them feel responsible to help you through it. So I set up very early on a board of advisors. It was unofficial. They weren't company directors. I had one marketing expert, I had one management expert, and I had one money expert. We
Wow,
would meet
great tip. Great tip.
once a month for an
Yeah.
hour. I had my ops manager would run the agenda. We had a normal standard minutes review of items from the last meeting. What did Tom say he was going to do compared to what he actually did? We'd review P&L results and so on. So it was a very short, sharp meeting, 1 hour. These days you could do it over Zoom. And they were played in honorarium, and they were given a 1 year. They opted in for 1 year. And to the end of the year, I let them off the hook and found some other people because I didn't want them giving up too much of their time ad infinitum. But that whole thing around you don't have to be smart, you only have to be smart enough to know how dumb you are, that applies to everything in life. It applies to relationships, it applies to health. Find people you can trust and listen carefully, have an open mind.
I could talk to you all day about this stuff. Like I can, how shall I go for like 2 hours today? Because no, I'm just kidding. But seriously, this is wonderful stuff. There's a huge golden nugget in that thing you just said. Huge golden
Yeah.
nugget. And
Ken, I think the important thing to underline here is that if we talked about a values-based business, things like life purpose, making a difference, honesty, transparency, love, these are all values that are important to me and a lot of people. But to bring those to life, you need a structure. And you need to ask yourself, what would that look like if I brought love to life? What would it look like if I brought happiness to life? What would happen if I brought business ethics to life? What would that look like? And then you create structures, often around time and often around protocols and habits, to bring those values to life. Otherwise, they're just bits and bytes on a computer screen, or it's a mission statement on the wall collecting dust. But we can unpack that. But the advisory board was one of those things. We had a list of company values, and that was reviewed at the advisory board at the start of the meeting, just to remind ourselves that these were the things we were wanting to live in our business. And what we were discussing should be a reflection of those values. What we were reviewing should be a measure of those values.
you mentioned earlier that you had your bank account set up kind of in recognition of the mistakes you knew you were going to make. Can
Right.
you share with us what you think your biggest mistake is that you made, and and what learning you took from that?
Yeah, great question. Biggest mistake I made. The two biggest mistakes I made, the common denominator was I didn't listen to myself. I abdicated either responsibility in one case, or I trusted someone else's opinion despite the warning lights going off in my own brain. So in one case, I expanded one of my businesses, two of my businesses internationally. In one case, I took on a business partner. And in hindsight, I abdicated too much responsibility for driving business growth to that person. They were a really great business partner, and I still value that relationship today. But they weren't the guy to drive growth. I needed to pay attention to that, and so that was my mistake. That was one mistake I made. The other mistake was listening to a remuneration advisor. I had a general manager I needed to put in charge of a certain country, a business, and I overpaid him and didn't supervise him properly. And so the remuneration package that I offered this particular general manager was such that it started bleeding the company dry, and I had to step in after 3 months and go, okay, that was a big mistake. So I think the common denominator is, practice self-awareness. You can do that by journaling and keeping logs. You will increase your awareness of your thoughts, and you'll get more honest about evaluating yourself, which I think is really important. And then back yourself. Ultimately do the advisory board thing. Do listen to other people, but use the presidential decision-making model where you're open-minded to opinions and you seek opinions, but you back yourself finally to make the ultimate decision. Never abdicate a decision that you feel is never give in to a decision that you feel goes against your values or goes against your gut. I always want to line up the head with the heart. I want a decision to make sense on paper rationally. I also want to feel right about that decision. Those two things, I need those two green lights before I go ahead.
Again,
So if
great.
one of those lights is red, don't go ahead.
Don't go. Okay. Um, on the positive side of things, okay, can you share with us maybe a tip on a really good sales and marketing strategy to use, one that was good for you?
Okay. Well, I think even zooming out a little bit, one of the first things I did with that new business that I mentioned that I started, we took international, the Entrepreneur Success Program, is I gathered my little team of three or four people around. I think probably on the very first day we hired some premises and I got them around. I said, okay, they knew I was launching this program called the Entrepreneur Success Program. And I said, what's our company all about? And they said, oh, it's about training, or it's about, making people's lives better, or it's about business growth. And I said, all of those things are true, but primarily we're a marketing company. And we need to recognize that that's our priority. We need to deliver on the value that we promise. We can't overpromise and underdeliver, but we have to get good at marketing. We have to get good at lead generation. We have to figure this thing out. So that was a fundamental strategic mindset decision that became a preoccupation for me, which led to my current business because people used to get approached by people and say, "How are you doing in marketing? Because you seem to be quite successful." So after that, in my target market, and people say to me, "Oh, you're a marketer. Can you help me with this thing?" And I said, "Well, being a marketer is like being a doctor. You can be a general practitioner or you can be a specialist. You wouldn't want a heart surgeon operating on your brain
Right.
because they don't have that expertise. So my expertise is marketing the invisible. The
Mm,
coaches, consultants, teachers, trainers, speakers, etc. People who don't have a physical thing they want to sell. It's a specialty, and you can't just put an advertisement on a billboard or a radio station like you could for, say, a golf clubs or a house you're selling and expect a response. You won't get it. So, given that context, that's my specialty, the best marketing method is through other people's email lists. And this is a 2 hour interview in itself with that subject matter. But first of all, if you and people can go and get my book from Amazon if they want to, Other People's Networks. It's actually called Other People's Networks. We can unpack the whole thing, but
and
it's a
and
free
by the way,
source.
it is a great book. I've read it, and people
Thanks,
should go
Ken.
read it. People should go read that book. It is a fabulous book. It's a very
Other people's networks.
yeah.
And so it's a free source of prospects. It's rinse and repeatable, so it gives you the consistency of marketing that we all seek without having to put money into it, which is really great. Free is a good price. You can carefully target the email lists who are likely to have your ideal clients in there and likely to be looking for your solution. And it's highly scalable. So it ticks every single box. And I've often said to my clients, my job is to waste money figuring out what doesn't work, so you just get what does work. So to that end, we've done radio advertisements, we've done billboards, we've done all sorts of things. But the very best source still today, and I started doing this in 1995, is other people's networks.
Okay, good. And again, people, you have to go read that book. It's a great book. Tom, I want to respect your time today, so I'm going to just ask you two more questions. Okay. First of all, where can people find out more about you, and is there a free resource that maybe you want to direct them to?
Well, I think people can go ahead and go to gettomsfreebook.com. It's a different book. It's called The Science of Being Demand, but it will give them a flavor of what we're doing. There is another book called, the first book I wrote is actually called Your Extraordinary Life, and it really unpacks a lot more of everything we're talking about here about life purpose, about how to figure out what your values are. Arguably, just as importantly, how to figure out the prioritization of your values to give you a context for decision making.
Great.
So they can get that book, Your Extraordinary Life, on Amazon, or they can simply email me and I'll send them a free PDF copy.
Perfect. Tom, what's your email address?
It's Tom at Leadsology, Leadsology, leadsology.guru.
Perfect.
And
And
it's
I'm going
not
to
guru as in, it's guru as in G, you are you.
and I'll definitely post that in the show notes as well. And last question. Is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't?
Yeah, I think, if we want to get to the nub of this thing is how do you, how do I get to where I want to go? And to that end, I mean, I mentioned that you create a structure. For example, family was important to me, so I had a 3-day weekend. I had every seventh week on holiday. Every second, seventh week was with our whole family, and every other seventh week was just with me and my wife. So we wanted to nurture those relationships. So just wanted to get that in because this is another example of a way we bring values to life. So how do I get to where I want to go? And I just want to quote Buck Rogers, paraphrase Buck Rogers probably, who was instrumental in IBM's growth in the very early days.
Right.
And he was asked, how did you grow IBM into the global giant that it is today? And he said, well, in hindsight, there were a lot of challenges, of course, but what happened was we sat down as a senior team and we figured out the vision. We figured out what we wanted IBM to look like when we were done. And then we quickly understood that unless we acted like that company from day one, we would never get there. So it's a little bit like be the change you want to see, but it's be the person you want to be. So if family time is important to you, start now. Start with the 3-day weekend. Start by committing to get home 6 out of 7 nights for dinner with the family. You do these things now. Take a step towards them now. You won't be able to take one step and be there, but you can take a step. List your highest values. List honesty, truth, family, love, whatever, loyalty, whatever it is, and figure out one action that you can take that will change your life for a step in that direction. So be the you of the future you want to be, but start now.
Tom, great advice. You've shared so many golden nuggets with us today. I hope that I know I certainly had great takeaways from this. I'm sure our listeners did too. Again, I want to thank you for your time today. You're generous, very generous with your time and with your insights. Everybody, go get Tom's free book. Definitely read his book on other people's networks. And I'm going to post a link for how you can contact him for the other free book he talked about. And if you found value in what you heard today, and how could you not, please share it with your friends. I invite you to do that. And I'll see you next time on the next episode of the Seven Figure Life Fulfillment Podcast.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks for being here, Tom.